Good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to have all of you today to discuss on the theme or to listen on the theme of readiness in India for adopting emerging digital approaches in skill development and the way forward. Um, all of us in this pandemic year have been exposed in a big way to how the digital world interacts with our world and has made skilling also a little different. We understand its potential better. We have learned in a much accelerated fashion how we could incorporate digital pathways to learning, to skill development. So therefore, I think the um, thought process today for having this discussion was to get a deeper insight into what kind of approaches are emerging and how should we be looking at it, in what way could we adopt it. And we have, of course, initial keynote address from Mr. Ramadorai, and all of us have, I think, good knowledge about his capabilities and his deep knowledge about this issue. I want to mention specifically that the digital approach within NSDC, when we had taken up, was through an arm of TCS ION, which had been discussing this in 2015-16, and eventually we ended up with eSkill India. So in some ways, the initial conceptualization of having digital platform was as early as 2015-16, though it took us time to fully grow it into its current position. And at that point of time, the chairman of NSDC was Mr. Ramadorai. So therefore, all thanks to him, that today we are having almost 1 crore folks actually who visit our websites are then going to our partners. Our partners, some of them are present today, Simplilearn, and then Microsoft. They all have their courses within the eSkill India platform that we had developed. So the idea was that we have a keynote address from him. We get his words of wisdom in the beginning about this important issue. And then we have three panelists with whom we thought we will hear for about 7 to 10 minutes and then have question answers following that. And the three panelists are Namita Datta, who is the program manager for solution for youth employment in the World Bank. Earlier she was in India in the Indian Administrative Service. She's a PhD from Cornell University. Then we have Indrani Choudhary, Chief Learning Officer from Microsoft. She works in a company which is globally well known and works in Indian context. So therefore, while Namita brings the global knowledge, Indrani will bring the global knowledge applied in the context of India. And Krishna Kumar, who is the founder and CEO of Simplilearn, one of the 40 under 40 CEOs and a continuous 3 years, I think several times by several magazines actually. He is a real practitioner and therefore will be able to give us a good view of what really happens inside the rings and how is he really adapting to it. And thereafter, it's basically question and answers. So I invite Mr. Ramadorai for his keynote address. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish, and good evening to all of you. I think I put together for the readiness in India for adopting emerging digital approaches in skill development and way forward. An excellent panel consisting of Ms. Namita Datta, Program Manager, Solutions for Youth Employment, World Bank, Ms. Indrani Choudhary, Chief Learning Officer, Microsoft, and Mr. Krishna Kumar, Founder, CEO, Simplilearn. And also, I welcome all the participants for this webinar. And it's very, very timely and a must for a nation like ours, where it's futuristic on educational technology and skill development, which is being hosted by the National Skill Development Corporation. I'm sure with the panelists, with Manish Kumar, being ready for the Q&A, be a very fruitful discussion, and we can look at multiple options which would be the guiding light for the skill development space in the post-COVID world. I think I've gone through some very, very unprecedented times with the COVID, and the COVID-19 is still playing it out in some of the Western countries with the second generation, third generation, etc., second incidences of the virus itself. And luckily, we have been spared so far, and we must thank everyone who is behind it in terms of the doctors, frontline workers, the pharmaceutical companies, the drug discovery, and every form of support that is coming from the government, whether it's the central government or the state government. I think the good news is the curve seems to be flattening in our country, and the vaccine has been already given to almost 7 million plus citizens or healthcare professionals in our country. But we just cannot be complacent despite the impending vaccines. We cannot let our guards down at this critical juncture as we enter a crucial phase in fighting against this pandemic. I think the dramatic speed at which COVID 19 hit us disrupted lives, livelihoods, communities, and the businesses worldwide, but more importantly, the education of our children. It's estimated that 1.3 to 1.5 billion students and youth across the globe have been affected due to the closure of schools and universities. I think in India, following the lockdown measures, nearly 320 million students have been affected because of the school closures. It's just not mainstream education, the vocational education stream was also affected because the vocational education requires a lot of hands-on experience. And without that, the education or the vocational education and skilling is incomplete. I think even as the school closures seem to offer a logical solution to enforce social distancing between the various communities or within communities, the prolonged closures tend to have disproportionate negative impact on the most vulnerable students, especially those coming from low-income families. The students have fewer opportunities and facilities for learning at home. Often their time out of school poses economic burden on their parents, as they may face multiple challenges, prolonged childcare, or even adequate food in the absence of school midday meals. Even now, most of the parents are skeptical to send their kids to school or college due to difficulty in maintaining social distancing and other COVID protocol norms. However, COVID-19 crisis has offered an opportunity to reinvent education and skills for the 21st century, which is riding on the back of what we call as the fourth industrial revolution. Pandemics and large-scale outbreaks can claim millions of lives, disrupt societies and devastate economies. And we also need to be conscious of the fact COVID-19 will not be the last pandemic in our deeply interconnected world. And sadly, the pundits predict that it may not be the worst. I think during the initial phase of pandemic, India witnessed a serious crisis in the form of exodus of migrant workers from the cities following the announcement of the lockdown. Caused by an overnight loss of wages, jobs, and subsequently food and shelter, the workers started walking towards home, sometimes covering distances of over 1,000 kilometers. It is estimated that over 10 to 30% of these migrant workers have not returned after easing of the COVID norms and may not return. They need support, and the government is attempting to reduce their distress through programs and stepping up investments in initiatives like Manrega. The fall in business demand has meant that India's massive MSME sector is on shaky terrain, and this requires definitely external support. Just one example to show that what lessons these unusual times teach us or how to cope in a changed social order. The Economic Forum report of 2021, the World Economic Forum, also talks about this climate change, skills, employment, and resurrection of the micro and small medium enterprises as one of the most critical challenges for the globe at large. Those skilled or semi-skilled laborers will have to reskill and upskill before they can land jobs near their hometown, which is the other priority. When I said 10 to 30% will not return. I think this we have to look at as an opportunity, a unique skilling opportunity, and we need to create necessary workspaces in the semi-urban centers of India. I think in large sections of our conventionally educated youth do not possess necessary skills that are required for a job, while larger sections of our workforce is uneducated and unskilled. I think only 4.69% of our total workforce in India has undergone formal skill training, as compared to 68% in the UK, 75% in Germany, 52% in the USA, and 80% in Japan. And of course, South Korea tops with 96% being skilled. So our human capital has to be converted into skilled and productive workforce. India has to come up with innovative solutions, and that's what the opportunity I said about skilling the unemployed and the low employability challenges. Each year, all of you know, 12 to 20 million youth, depending upon how you count, need to acquire skills to earn a livelihood. That's the scale of opportunity in front of us. And we need to see how the demographic dividend is put to productive capacity, and skilling takes the center stage through innovation. I think the labor share of productivity is also one of concern, and advanced economies are not necessarily waiting for Indian youth to power their economic growth. Some of the social issues we have seen during this pandemic also, because the Western countries, the advanced countries have also lost their jobs, and they are trying to solve their own problem before allowing immigration or work permits for people who need to go with skills. I think the refugee crisis is what I meant by this, and we need to see that in this context. I think we need to still generate enough employment through the fourth industrial revolution or the 21st century skills, as we call it. And also the climate change and the ecological challenges can produce a number of jobs, millions of jobs. So the economic and ecological well-being is what I'm talking about. And that's what we need to do. I think shortages are known, but I think I'll urge upon our training partners, which NSDC has developed over these years, should come together to develop new modules that will encourage more the train the trainer programs, in addition to training the youth itself, and also the women's share of employment, the women's share of vocational education also has to take center stage and scale up very quickly. I'm hearing of companies within our own group, namely the Tata group, where they are looking at vocational skills in the high end of manufacturing through women completely, and those will come to reality in the near future. Also, the Indian Institute of Skills on the models of capability like IITs are also coming into fruition thanks to our Honorable Prime Minister's vision. You're going to see those shortly but surely, and that would also demonstrate the kind of scale we need to do and the ecosystem we are trying to create, connecting the various training providers who need to make use of some of these things, whether through training the trainers or through training of the youth, but more for productive and gainful employment or turning them into entrepreneurs. We are at again the cusp of growth after the pandemic. Whether we call it a V-shaped recovery, W-shaped recovery, does not matter, but at the end of the day, there's an opportunity. Also, programs like the Atmanirbhar Bharat and the spread of internet via fiber across to the panchayats, skill education will see a transformational change. And artificial intelligence and automation of work will be at the center stage, and it will reimagine the whole skill development and education. I mean, imagine a shop floor where the supervisor is seated on a remote location, preferably within the comforts of his native place, and making changes on his handheld device to adjust the production flow of a car in a factory 2,000 kilometers away. Another engineer is attending to an emergency operation shutdown from an unknown location to deal with the situation on the floor of the factory. That's the future I'm talking about. A future enabled by automation that will redefine the job roles to perform more efficiently, and the unnecessary commutes or unnecessary back and forth, even in cities like Mumbai or Bangalore or Noida or Gurgaon or Pune, all these will be at the choice of the people, and the employers are completely open to this. The IT industry has demonstrated that 85% to 90% of the workforce is working out of homes and doing skilled jobs from the comfort of their homes or from the comfort of any place. Any place, anytime, anywhere is going to be integrated into the workforce of the future. And that's by choice of the workforce and the choice of the organizations that employ them or that contract them. The gig economy is also going to play a very, very critical role, where you don't have to work a full-time job, but you can be working on demand with the kind of capability, skills. The platform which NSBC people are building or have built will enable gig workers also to be a part of that, including creating a database, which I'm sure will be very, very beneficial for the future. All I'm saying is our country has an enormous potential to take leadership because the 21st century skills and the Industrial Revolution 4.0, everybody is equal and we have the opportunity and the mental capacity and the mental well-being or innovation capability through entrepreneurship to reimagine and redo some of these things. That's the opportunity where we can compete with the best in the world and be a benchmark in number of areas for the other parts of the world. For example, a welder from Palakkad, Kerala, or a nurse from Paramada in Andhra Pradesh should be able to compete with the best in any part of the world. Also, we have to put in place agreements with several international agencies which have been put together and that will also stand us from a benchmark point of view, from a transferability of skills, and develop ecosystems in a connected manner. And we digitize and reduce the paperwork, and digitization becomes better for governance. I think NSDC has always led the way by bringing in new training and assessment partners, create new training centers, and bringing in the industry support through a number of sector skill councils. The national occupation standards, qualification packs were created to reflect both Indian realities and the aspirations of our youth. I think the reach and presence, I think all of you will know, 11,000 training centers, 10,950 to be precise, across 28 of the Indian states and 7 union territories. I think what NSDC has achieved, I must compliment the leadership led by Manish Kumar. But at the end of the day, the board has been very supportive. The board has had encouraged international partnerships, and they have opened expertise to global flowing in to improve our training methods and standards. I think the government tenure, when I was there, opened my eyes to the real India through my travels to remote corners, whether it was Northeast, whether it was Jammu and Kashmir, or further down the southern India. Young people, women, parents, I was initially concerned with their problems, but as the young people, women, parents, they were convinced, and we also had the House of Tatas responded in a very strong way through a skilling initiative, what we called as the Tata Strive, which has impacted more than 2.5 lakh youth. But then it combines pedagogy, methodology, and technology. And digital training was experimented by a phygital model, which I mean is physical and digital training for courses like BFSI or F&B, food and beverages steward. I think the COVID crisis catalyzed the use of digitalized skill development organization, but left with no choice but to move into the digital space. I think as chairman of the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, he too saw a potential of enhancing and enriching the university system through what we call as a vocational education, the National University Student Skill Development Program that was implemented by TIS, one such scalable model, so that the student, even while they are performing or pursuing a bachelor's course, they are able to take credits, whether it is credit, diploma, or advanced diploma, in the occasions of their choice. I think thousands of colleges in the country get connected through this program, and it addresses the employability or unemployability of graduates in our country. But an employable youth with the degree courses plus the diploma in a skill of their choice makes it very compelling for anyone to get employed and anyone who can follow the passion in addition to the degrees which are there. I think the connectivity through the smartphones, access through the broadband, access to the panchayats are all going to give us enormous amount of capability where the digital model will become a way of life. And then the organization will build a workforce that understand the culture and dynamics of what we call as the 21st century skills. I think disruption we have to be prepared for. Disruption is what creates the opportunity for thinking and reinventing. And disruption is what creates the entrepreneurship energy in our country. There are ample methodologies, and the government and the state governments are putting their effort behind this. Every youth I mentor or meet with these days We're only asking that please vet our ideas, help us with the market connect or the marketing strategies, and more importantly, brand building not for India alone, but brand building for the world at large. I think you see advances in the field of AI, robotics, 3D printing, Internet of Things, and cyber systems, medical systems. These will definitely create prosperity and the newer jobs. I think newer framework needs to be created for the newer jobs, but more importantly, cognitive skills like critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and empathy, management and leadership, relationship building, and most importantly, collaboration, which is absolutely critical. Flexibility in learning and flexibility in collaborating. No one is going to lose out because he or she shares the knowledge or learns from others. We are in a world where hierarchy has no place and we all collectively learn from each other or share with each other. Transparency, openness for the common good is what I'm talking about, and that's what we need to work on. Basic science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, in addition to the other forms of liberal arts, are critical, and multiple skill sets are going to be there. And team playing and supporting each other is absolutely the 21st century requirement. I think the organization of work, how it is to be done at the shop floor or within a corporation, is another important facet, which I would strongly encourage. I think our National Education Policy 2020 is a very progressive one. It has taken a lot of inputs from the corporate, from the colleges, from the schools, from the teachers, and more importantly, the beneficiaries. And it was led by nobody other than Professor Rangan, who is one of the most prominent scientists of our country and defined the challenges of the space research, space programs in this country is currently known for. I think the NEP also provides students of middle level should be exposed to hands-on training in vocational skills, whether it is carpentry, plumbing, electrical repairing, horticulture, pottery, embroidery. I think the policy has set the target of providing vocational skills to at least 50% of the students by 2025 in such a way that the vocational skills acquired at school level may be further extended to higher education level, depending upon the requirements and the needs and passion of individual students. I think the day is not far, like I said, with the entrepreneurship energy, where the Indian youth will be seen as a potential job provider through a set of vocational, employable, and entrepreneurial skills imparted to them at different stages of education and training. It's not necessary to go through that stream continuously, but you can choose when you want at a time and place. And that's the power of this digital model. And the startup ecosystem is also absolutely at the, it's growing by leaps and bounds. I think as the nation embarks on our Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's an opportune moment to accord strategic status to human capital and deepen the integration of long-term human capital planning into economic policy as it is at the center of the self-reliance. I think, like I said, after years of anticipation and considerable amount of hype, fifth generation wireless networks are finally becoming a reality. 5G could affect our lives more dramatically than any technology shift since the internet itself, because 5G enables us to realize the potential essentially of a fully connected world, and more importantly, a fully connected India across the length and breadth, east, west, north to south, whatever you may say. The arrival of 5G will accelerate the implementation of vocational education, in my opinion, and it will potentially be a game changer. 5G could serve as a bridge between augmented reality and real-time classrooms for all, real-life classrooms for all ages. Lifelong learning could reach new levels of productivity with holographic instructors and concepts that emerge from textbooks and videos and become immediate reality, which are happening as we speak. So in end, the possibilities are immense. The technological revolution that is transforming the way of teaching and learning and collaboration itself is getting redefined for common good. When I say common good, the social disparities, the haves and the have-nots, access for a few, whereas access to many is the mantra we need to practice. And that happens by sharing an equal opportunity through the infrastructure that is being put in place. And innovation in all of this is the central, and it's an absolute imperative for our skill development. Transformation of vocational as well as mainstream education will surely not come with traditional approaches like building more institutions. We'll have to do things differently by leveraging technology. The physical infrastructure is not the solution, whereas innovative ways of using existing technology with the digital in the underlying theme is critical. So we must revolutionize the skilling ecosystem by easy, efficient, and scalable ideas in all aspects of skilling, starting from mobilization, advocacy to employment, as well as continuing professional development and governance. Again, in the end, I would like to thank all the participants, thank the panelists, and more importantly, thank Mr. Manish Kumar, the CEO and MD of NSDC and NSDC itself, one to organizing this very, very timely conference and interaction, as well as inviting me to address you on the readiness in India for adopting emerging digital approaches in skill development. All the very best. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Mr. Manish Kumar.
Thank you so much, sir, for this very comprehensive keynote address that sets the stage for the discussion that will follow. Some of your words will actually ring for a long time with us. The emphasis on immense possibility that the digital world brings, lifelong learning, collaboration, and the most important, disruption as an opportunity. So I'm aware, sir, that you have some additional meetings.
I'll stay for 10 minutes. So I want to hear the panelists for some time.
That'll be great.
Thank you so much, Manish.
So moving on to the next stage of the discussion, we have Namita Datta with us, and the idea was that we go from outside in. So Namita is somebody who knows India, has seen India from within working at the grassroots level, and then she works at a very macro level now. And how does she see opportunity within India? What are the approaches you see, and what are the lessons for us from where you stand? Now, if you could throw some light on that, Namita, in 7 to 10 minutes. So over to you, Namita.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Manish. Thank you for inviting me. You know that I have long been a big fan of the work that NSDC does, and which is why time and again we are inviting Manish and Akshay to present at our sessions, and they're always getting sort of a standing ovation. Just because I think what you're doing, just from my perspective, from a global perspective, what NSDC is doing is really, what should I say, ahead of the game. You're really ahead of the game, and are actually examples for the rest of the world. So really, this is so as I was thinking about what I would say at this webinar, I realized I don't have probably a lot of anything probably new for especially this audience, because as I said, you're already ahead of the game. I'll share a few insights globally, and I was under the impression that I should have a few slides, which I'll try and present. Just you can bear with me for a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Namita, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So just very quickly, where I come from, I'm based in Washington DC right now, and I'm head of a global program that's called Solutions for Youth Employment. It's a multi-partner, multi-stakeholder kind of coalition coordinated by the World Bank. And very briefly, there are sort of 4 key components of our ecosystem. We have a large network of youth employment projects that are not World Bank, but we've created this sort of a network so that we are sort of learning as we are doing. This is like a little learning laboratory that we have, and we focus particularly not so much on the bigger issues, but more on the design issues. How do you really design programs? So the impact portfolio is a set of innovative programs that we selected, and this is our little learning laboratory. We also have an advisory council, so about 30 to 40 companies have joined us. A lot of them are the big tech players. And our chair of the board, we have a board on top, but the chair rotates. And this year, the chair is Microsoft. It's a very strong partner of S4Y, and I'm delighted to be on the same panel with Indrani. So we work very closely together with Microsoft. And then the third component of our network is an internal World Bank one, because you can imagine youth employment is sort of spread out across the World Bank, the agriculture, digital development, urban development, several teams, technical teams work on youth employment. So S4Y sort of brings that together. And then we have a very interesting group of young people. They are from all over the world. They are people who have come from very difficult situations, but have now set up something entrepreneurial. And we make sure that we are carefully listening to them. And youth voice is really important for how we design anything that we do. So our focus in S4Y is on innovation and on knowledge. Now, why innovation? So the reason we decided that we need to really focus on innovations as they're happening on the ground is because we did a very detailed stock take of evidence from impact evaluation to find, to really understand what's working and what's not working. After all, as a development community, we have invested quite a bit of resources in youth employment programs. But have we really solved the problem? And it was a very disheartening finding. We found that 70% programs, this is across the world, have had actually zero impact on youth employment. Only 30% had any impact. And even there, the impact was really tiny and it disappeared after a few months. So very, very disheartening news for us. So it was clear to us that we need to rethink how we think about youth employment. So as we dug a little bit deeper, it was clear that a lot of organizations were designing youth employment programs by only thinking about what we call the supply side. Supply side means training, counseling, mentoring. And they think that, when we design a supply side program or a skills or training program, we've solved the youth employment problem. But it is important to have really strong, very, very good training, but it isn't enough. And what we realized was that we were missing the demand side. And by the demand side, really the private sector. So unless the private sector itself is growing and creating new jobs, you may roll out the best training program in the world, but it isn't going to solve the employment problem. It may address employability, but not employment. And so we put together guidelines where we are encouraging governments to think about this more holistically, to really make sure that their training and supply side is very, very strongly linked to the demand side. And this is where what NSDC has done is brilliant, because the way you've structured yourself, you've sort of structurally incorporated the demand side in how you're designing the supply side, which is why we keep turning to NSDC as an example, and we've sort of shared this example across the world in terms of how one should think about it. So let's think about skilling for a minute. Let's talk about that. Now, the demand side, and Mr. Ramadorai actually completely recapped it so brilliant. So technology is completely changing our worlds, right? I mean, this famous statistic that 65% of our kids who are entering school today are actually going to be doing jobs which don't even exist today. That's how rapidly our worlds are changing. Jobs are coming up, but jobs are disappearing. I don't want to get into the details of it. All of you are aware that this is really a rapidly shifting world. The way our firms are organizing their supply chain, Mr. Ramadorai actually really explained that well. The shop floor has changed. You could be a company based here, but you could be procuring goods from 7 different countries or from rural areas where there are clusters. So the supply chains are being reorganized, because of which companies are completely changing their hiring practices. They need to be adapting to this world. So what is a full-time job today could tomorrow be just a part-time job. Or the company may feel that they just procure outsource and just have a project-specific contract. So hiring practices are also online platforms, and the gig economy is again making completely, I love the phrase you used, anytime, anywhere, any place. Etsy, for example, now enables people to be small craftspeople in their homes, but then sell online through e-commerce platforms. So to recap, our world is completely shifting. It's changing very, very rapidly. And so how we think about skills obviously needs to change, or perhaps change even faster to keep pace and make sure that we are really addressing the needs of the private sector. So just to summarize from my perspective globally, how we think about skills has to shift, right? What we are teaching our children and youth who are transitioning to the labor market, what we are teaching has to change quite quickly. How we teach also needs to change quite quickly, and our delivery models need to change, and when we teach also needs to change. So quickly, what do I mean by that? So what we need to teach. It is clear to anybody, I guess, who's part of our discussion today, that digital skills are now absolutely foundational. I mean, they are not just foundational to have a job. They are simply foundational just to exist in the 21st century, just to be able to interact with your government, to be able to interact with your community. You need to have basic digital skills. And this is something that should be mainstreamed in elementary schools. It should be mainstreamed in TVET institutions, but it should not be taught as a separate computer course, but sort of really embedded and mainstreamed in the curriculum. We recently did a 5-study. We looked at 5 countries in Africa, and we said, we asked the question, what really is the demand for digital skills in these 5 countries? Like, if we were to want to create an ecosystem of private training providers, can we estimate what the demand is? And we found that, I mean, but in India, of course, this is many times larger, but just to give you a sense, it's 11 billion. 11 billion is the size of that market, of which 8 billion actually comes from business to business, business to government, and a smaller percentage is business to consumer, especially the affordability issue if you think about private training providers. But really, there's a cumulative demand for a digital course of about 114 million, of which 3 million are directly in the ICT sector. What that means is it's the non-ICT sectors as well that are going to need digital skills. So we looked at the sectors. We can see even an average basic sort of farmer is going to need digital skills tomorrow to be able to, let's say, just check the government website for crop prices. I know crop prices is a sensitive issue in India right now, but for a farmer to know what are the crop prices these days, or to be able to, let's say, access information from a veterinarian, to use a video to understand, okay, my crops have a pest. Just basic digital skills, even a farmer will need to have. Or if look at the services sector, for example, if you are going to be an Uber driver, you are going to need to be able to download Google Maps or be able to navigate online maps. So these are really foundational. The way we look at digital skills, really, we usually adopt this typology of 4 levels, and I think it's not new for anybody, I guess. So you start with foundational, then intermediate non-ICT skills, then intermediate ICT skills, and then advanced. And I guess depending on which way you are, I would imagine in India there would be a huge unmet demand for intermediate and advanced skills. But I would again think, just listening to the morning keynote speech, that there is a big unfinished agenda on foundational skills as well, which is really rural youth, women, poor people who are not yet connected, and we really, this is a really important agenda. And again, the study that we did in Africa said, okay, so what types of digital skills are needed? And again, it's pretty clear. A lot of employers, this was a survey with employers, they said it's really basic digital skills, the bars in orange really, that they are looking for. Of course, they also wanted data analytics and artificial intelligence, but you can see a lot of this demand is on basic digital skills. The ability to write an email, the ability to go online and do a search, or to draft a Word document. I mean, some basic skills are the most critical needs. But it's not all digital. Again, just referencing speech today, soft skills are becoming even more important for employers, right? I mean, the ranking of this would be different in different countries, but I don't think you will disagree with me when I say critical thinking, communication, problem solving, teamwork are really critical. But two skills, and COVID has shown us that these are becoming and going to become even more important. Two soft skills are going to be adaptability. Just your ability to land on your feet, to change as the world is changing under you, is going to be extremely important, not just for us as employees, but also as training institutions. We need to be agile and adaptable. And the second skill, that soft skill, is the ability to learn how to learn. Just learning how to learn is also going to be an important skill. And I believe Coursera, for example, has just introduced another course on learning to learn, because that's going to be an important skill too. But of course, what kind of digital skill you invest in as a country will have to be on a careful demand analysis, and a quick one, because you can't anticipate more than a few years, because the world is shifting under our feet. And this is just to give you an example of how detailed we did the study in Africa. We went into the sort of different sectors and tried to estimate what kinds of demands they have on demand they would have in the coming few years. So how to teach? So a little bit on what to teach, I gave sort of from a global perspective, but how should we be thinking about our delivery model? And I'm talking particularly from a youth employment perspective, not so much the core education, but really TVETs and training institutions for youth who are transitioning to the labor market. And the big message for us across the world, and this really came through during COVID, is flexible and blended. Blended means you have to have a smart way to combine some version of online training with some version of classroom training. Now, why online? Because, COVID showed us that training institutions that had online abilities were quite resilient. The others really had to close business. Now, online, if you are going to teach youth people in an online learning way, the very act of learning online is going to teach them some basic digital skills, which are going to be important for their jobs. But particularly as we are doing research, particularly on access to digital jobs for women and for people with disability, these are two groups that we've done a lot of research on recently. We find that having the ability to access a learning module at home while you are looking after children, for example, if it's a woman, is really important. And it could also reduce the cost of programs and allow programs to go to scale. But let's not throw the baby with the bathwater. I mean, I think going online is all great and has a really important advantage when you want to reach scale. But the classroom component is also quite important. Youth, would tend to get distracted when they are home. So just to be able to come to a classroom can bring them back to focus. Some youth may not even have access to the internet, so just the classroom would be important. And also, interestingly, we are finding that there's now hardcore evidence on this, that when there is an epidemic and there is sort of a situation where we are asking people to be locked down, domestic violence rates go up. So really for women, it's a nuanced issue. Like they would like online access where they can learn from home, but the ability to go to a classroom where you may have a community or a peer group is also important. And simply isolating them sometimes has had an increase in domestic violence. So sort of a flipped classroom model where you are somehow teaching the theoretical aspects online and you come to class when there is something more hands-on, or let's say you are doing a project with an industry leader, is the kind of model that's working quite well. Now, Commonwealth of Learning, I was quite impressed. I saw how they were teaching even something which I thought you couldn't teach online, like carpentry and welding. They were now being able to develop sort of online modules for that. But also, I think we have to very, very carefully offer not just e-learning, but m-learning, so something that somebody can access on their phone. Given the fact that the mobile penetration rate in India and a lot of developing countries are so high, we have to take advantage of that. Something that you can access on your phone is going to become really important. Also, I think you have to really think very carefully as we use these blended models to think about those who tend to get left out. Rural youth, women, people who don't have access to high-speed internet. And this is where, we are partnering with some of the bigger companies to see how they are coming up with innovative low bandwidth models. So Microsoft has a really good community training platform. Again, a low bandwidth solution. Accenture used Raspberry Pi for their Skills to Succeed program in Africa. Visa is one of our partners, and I was quite impressed to see how, they have a series of financial literacy training modules. They converted them to bite-sized videos. I was quite amazed how, they were 30 seconds, just 30 seconds. And the idea is that young people are sort of running around a little bit distracted. So quickly, if you're able to teach them something in a bite-sized module, you're going to be able to go far. But also during COVID, I saw interesting innovations were happening. One of our partners in Rwanda, for example, when COVID struck, they quickly adapted to, and they were teaching a lot of rural youth. They quickly adapted, and they interestingly put sort of a multimodal kind of a strategy where some of the basic learning they did through radio, just because a lot of their kids did not have access to the internet. So they taught basic stuff on the radio, but they combined that with text messages, like lesson prompts with a text message, plus a little bit of one-on-one mentoring. So this sort of three-pronged strategy, particularly for youth who did not have access to the internet in the time of COVID, where you couldn't come to a classroom. So it's just being innovative and not forgetting people who we tend to forget usually. It is, and this is where, partnering with Microsoft and some of these large companies where cutting edge innovation is happening on some of these solutions is really inspiring. But I think how we think about blending, just a few sort of thoughts there. The devil is in the detail, right? When you're blending some bit online, some bit classroom, how should we do this? Really important to focus on the interface. I mean, I know it's a really micro kind of a point, but your landing page, if you are teaching kids in rural Bihar, it shouldn't have the image of the teacher who looks like a blonde American, to be honest, right? I mean, you have to have relatable characters, the right language. So really focusing on the interface of your online module. Also carefully thinking that if you're going to go online, some portion online, you're going to, as a training provider, have to invest much more on monitoring rather than delivering the training, just to make sure that you are keeping on track. One tool that a lot of our partners are using is peer support. We find that young people tend to learn much better if it's one of them standing up in front of the classroom. So let's say somebody has done very well in a particular curriculum. Why don't we ask that young person to further teach some of their colleagues? So using this sort of peer training is really important as we design the blend. And then mentoring has become so important as we are moving more to online teaching mechanisms. Mentoring and some kind of a one-to-one interaction has to be designed in the delivery model. I won't go into detail, I probably have run out of time, but when to teach, and this is a big shift now from the human capital development agenda, that this whole model that perhaps I grew up with, or, my parents grew up with, that you go to school, you go to college, you do a job, you join a particular organization, you work all your life there, and then you retire. That model is gone. Frankly, it's gone. And we are going to have to change jobs several times in our careers. And so the model for skill development now has to be lifelong training. We have to be lifelong learners because we have to be quickly adapting and shifting and changing. So the ability to learn constantly, not just till you're 20 or 25, but constantly has to be taught and has to be inculcated, has to be the paradigm with which we approach skill development. I'm going to go quickly. So just to say also that really interesting lifelong learning models we are working with in IFC, which is the part of the World Bank that invests in the private sector, has really invested in some lifelong learning models through EdTech. And I won't go into details here, but I think this is an area where a lot of the private sector has could develop good business models. There's a lot of business opportunity here in B2B, B2 government, for having lifelong learning as sort of a paradigm. I'm going to stop here, but I just wanted to say a couple things. So as you know, like I said, we have this learning laboratory. We're constantly looking for new ideas on not just what people are teaching, but how they are teaching. So during COVID, we were looking for what were the new things that were happening, not just COVID, actually, even before that. And I won't go through this whole slide. It's too busy and it's a bad slide. But just a few ideas, that we are learning from our partners. So interesting to see the use of gamification, for example, sort of new technology, use of games, or simulated interactions, which can give young people this real life scenario. So you can actually, as a young person, see what is the life of a cook. What does it actually mean to be a cook, for example? So those sorts of models are really interesting to be able to help young people navigate to the right careers. And they're coming up quite rapidly. This is an area to really keep a close eye on. We also are finding interesting models where training providers are using insights from behavioral science. So one of our partners, for example, has something they call a fire in the belly test. Like when they take on somebody to train, they do a test on how much fire do you have in your belly. Like as a young person, how driven are you? Because the more driven you are, the better you learn. But also different financial models. Interesting, what we call paid forward models that are really doing well. And these are particularly doing well in Africa. So what do you mean by paid forward models? So we have partners who, what they do is they don't charge the beneficiary immediately for the training. They say that you will pay us back once you're placed in a job and you've actually kept that job for 6 months. So there's some sort of a paid back to the organization, but only once you've got a job. So don't charge youth upfront because usually youth don't have that capacity to pay. But also paid forward in an operational sense. So there are models where you take in a certain amount of beneficiaries, young people, you train them. You don't ask them to pay you for the training. The only condition you put on them is that once they receive the training, they will train another 5 or 10 or 2 or whatever number more people. So sort of help them become digital ambassadors. What this does is it creates a spillover effect, number one. Number two, I think the very fact that you are teaching as a young person, you've just learned something. Now that you're asked to teach it further, it further solidifies your learning. And number three, frankly, it could be another job for this young person who has just been trained. You could be a trainer tomorrow, and that's the job. So interesting models like that. I'm not going to go into all of this, but we're also finding a lot of training programs adopting yoga and mindfulness, just because during COVID, we find one of the biggest hits has been the emotional, mental health of youth. So not to forget that also. I won't. I've already probably gone over time, Manish. I'm sorry, but I'll stop here and happy to answer questions and have a more detailed discussion later.
Thanks, Namita. That was really, really interesting. And we didn't stop you because it was so interesting. So, and I think people will have questions. So there's a comment box on the right bottom for the audience. In case you guys are interested, please put in your questions there. Somebody from NSTC will pick up that question and send it to me, compile it and send it to me for me to ask Namita and others. Next, we have Indrani Choudhary, and Microsoft was mentioned so many times. that we are very curious to listen to you now. So over to you,
Right.
Indrani.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Manish, not only for inviting me, but I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank you and your leadership as well as entire NSDC for leading such a great initiative throughout India. We are sure that, with all the efforts and initiatives that you lead, we should soon be the global hub for talent. Right. So thank you so much. And we are very, very happy and privileged to partner with you. Now, the question or the theme of this entire discussion was how ready are we as a country, and in terms of adopting emerging digital approaches in skill development. So I'll first start with that answer and then come and try and justify why I said something. So the first part is I think as a country we've all as in we would be our individuals in the country, all citizens, whether it is a student, whether it is a working professional, all private organizations and government together, the connected ecosystem. I think definitely we have started the journey, but this journey does not have an end at all. So we continue to have different milestones. Some people are leading the race, but some people are little laggards and they will cross somebody. But that's a scene. It is a journey where I would say India is has embarked already. And we started the journey not post COVID. It was pre COVID that we had this entire industrial revolution 4.0, and the labor disruption that it was bringing and the need for reskilling was very well realized. In fact, so much so that Microsoft, we started investing a lot in training our entire ecosystem, whether it is our teachers, our students, our customers, partners, the citizens, on building the tech intensity. And simply put, tech intensity is basically how do you adopt or embrace technology and build solutions using that technology. So we had started with all these initiatives throughout pan India, and globally also, and that is Satya's drive, right? The culture mindset of how do we empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And we being a platform company, obviously we wanted people to leverage technology. Now, about 12 months back, we all know what happened when we were hit by the pandemic, which accelerated, and in fact, it forced many of us to accept the digital approaches of training, which to some were a novelty, but then 12 months back, it became the need for survival. We all witnessed how the education industry itself got interrupted with the onset of pandemic. With schools online, students, teachers had no choice but to jump on to Teams, Zoom, whatever is the digital format, and start delivering the classrooms. But a sudden switch to the online learning without any planning, especially in countries like India, where the backbone for the curriculum or that entire thing was not totally digital friendly, that resulted in, and that is still resulting in, students becoming very passive. There is this common terminology called digital fatigue, right? So that is something which is cropped. So we are ready, we've immediately switched on to that online mode, but is it becoming effective? Maybe not. Again, we are saying that we different companies, different countries, different academic institutes are different in different points in the journey, so some are more advanced than others. But we'll talk about our readiness in terms of the first part, which is how relevant it is, how immersive it is, and for in terms of the pedagogy. The second one was again with the sudden switch to the online mode, we saw the digital divide, right? I mean, there were people, and as Namita also alluded, there's so many people who don't even have the bandwidth or don't even have the devices to go, and so therefore it was a complete shutdown. So what are we going to do in terms of making the infrastructure becomes a big lever for us to be ready for the digital skilling in scale? So now when we are talking about, and likewise, while I was talking about the education industry, businesses also were on the similar journey. Some of them had already embraced, and there's a lot of, nice online courses that we have been going. Either it is self-curated or companies like Simplilearn, Coursera, everybody, we've been onto that journey. Whereas some companies were really not there. They still believed in the classroom training. But I guess post-pandemic, every company, especially the one which are here to stay, those who are not there, I'm sorry for that, but we've all realized that the share of the company goes by its biggest asset, which is human capital, and therefore we are also evolving the continuous, way of making sure our employees are very much engaged and they learn the job that is relevant to stay, productive. Now, when I look at readiness standpoint, we talked about two components that we need to look at. One is pedagogy and the other is infrastructure. Both of these also require some investment, either at the government level or at the organization level at some point in time. And the recent WEF report, if you have read through, reskilling as an agenda, it actually came up also as a Davos agenda in 2021 agenda, that reskilling need for the global workforce. So the World Economic Forum report actually says that you have to take reskilling as an investment. And when you take reskilling as an investment, the report actually says that there is a potential of $6.5 trillion to be added to the GDP at the global level. And it specifically calls out in India and countries where there is a huge digital divide and digital literacy gap. The potential of leveraging, this opportunity is much more. So much so that the percentage can be anywhere from 6.1 to 6.8. I think that's what I recall. So now let's look at coming back from that global economy to what we are doing. We are really, really going heavily on the pedagogy part. First, most of the private companies, whether it is Microsoft, we're looking at our democratizing our learning, the all the state of the art technology which we employees are using. We give it to students, we give it to citizens, to corporate employees to go and start learning technology. Now imagine a coding, right? It can be, you can't just go into a digital mode and just learn what is coding. You need to practice, you need to really have hands-on experience. So what we have done is the pedagogy looks at what the learner needs, what is it that he will not get switched off. It's like applying design principles on the learner. We have what we call the sandbox environment, the virtual labs, where people are actually coding. What is missing in a classroom? You typically talk to somebody and say, hey, is this okay, is that not okay? So we need that interactivity within that, a communication, the collaboration. So we build in the github, if you're aware of, it's like a house of developers with it's technology agnostic. It has 40 million developers. So you have the interactions through the MS Learn itself. You will interact with some coder somewhere, some miles apart, seven seas apart, and they'll come and interact with themselves. We have so much of artificial intelligence infused in it. In fact, not only Microsoft, I was in a panel discussion moderating with one of the leading BFSI sector, and where they're saying that even the learner is actually choosing what he needs to learn. The curriculum is becoming defined basis his role using artificial intelligence. He's told, how can I curate content, not only what my company is providing, but from outside, because I have chosen this as my career path or my learning journey. So it's not, the corporates have a lot of assets which they are democratizing. I think we are ready there. Is it not, is it 100 out of 100? Maybe not, but we are always involving. The journey is there, but we are on the higher end of the spectrum. I think from a government perspective, the NEP 2020 policy itself is pretty ambitious. It's good. And I think if I look at the union budget of 2021, it's also talking about further strengthening it with a lot of toy learning methodology. So something which is used in the entertainment industry. So how do you really excite the student to stay glued on in a digital world? So I think these efforts from government, the private companies, and I have to mention EdTech because we have Simplilearn also coming in. It's booming for them. I mean, they're coming up with the most innovative gaming technologies, adult learning, methodologies. The pedagogy is really, really strong because we know that that's going to be the future. Even if we come back into the normal has shifted, the new normal will be a blend, and it needs to have. So we ready to answer that question? somewhere in the middle. Some of them are in the spectrum, but we are very, very bullish that we'll, keep on evolving. The next one is on the digital divide that we were talking about, is on the infrastructure. And Namita did allude that, we do, they are partnering with somebody to provide either bandwidth. We have some software to give for, low bandwidth compatibility. But I guess there is a requirement from the government as well as the 3PP partnership to look at taking the infrastructure level up. It's not a singular objective. And I think, again, what gives me enough of assurance is at least the 2021 union budget that got presented. Um, it has a component which is specifically on revitalizing infrastructure systems for education. So there is a, I guess in the previous years it was not there. It was what I could make out from the budget. We have kept budget aside for infrastructure. I think the best part again is that last year the total percentage of budget on education was around 3%. Now we have kept 3.5%. So it's an increment from a percentage of the GDP allocation. So all of this put together, I guess it's a responsibility of the private players. It's a responsibility of the government. It's a responsibility of the learners themselves to keep readying ourselves for the jobs that do not even exist today, right? Jobs, the future generations jobs. So in conclusion, I would say, again, coming back to the main theme, are we ready? Yes, we have taken the journey. We'll never be fully ready. We'll keep on evolving, because when we reach at the percentile 9, we'll think, oh, we are not good enough. We'll have more nuances coming up. So with that, I give the floor back to you, Manish, so that we can have the next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Indrani. And that was really, really insightful. We have now somebody who is actually right in the field, right in the game of doing things that we were speaking about. My dear friend Krishna Kumar, one of the most entrepreneurial person you'll ever meet, and very effective in his entrepreneurial spirit. Perhaps as effective as Corona, but from a benign perspective. So over to you, Krishna, and please tell us what you are doing, how you are doing, and what do you see the future as?
So thank you, Dr. Manish, for the invite. It was such a nice time spent. I never imagined that it is going to be so insightful. So great to hear Mr. Ramadorai, Namita, and Indrani's very, very insightful things. Like, I'm really, really happy that I decided to join this session today and spend all my time. So very, very happy. So I'll just share my perspectives. If we are in a business of digital skilling, I started this 10 years back. I never imagined that the world will change so much in the next 10 years. And look, we are here, and all of us are talking about the same thing. But I wanted to give a little flip to the topic. Instead of saying how ready we are in India for digital skilling and how will we get there, from my perspective, I look at this as a global opportunity. Like skilling the entire world on digital, which is going to be the foundational skill for future, is a huge opportunity for India. And I'll give you a little bit my background on what we are doing and how we are already leveraging. And I'm sure many companies will come and take this as a huge opportunity. We train World Bank employees in US for many, many years. We train thousands of Accenture and Visa employees in US. In fact, we train Visa employees on security. And so that's one side of our spectrum. We are the partner of South African government as part of their fourth industrial revolution place that they're taken as part of the World Economic Forum to make their youths ready for the fourth industrial revolution. So pretty wide spectrum, right from Africa to US, and of course we are the largest player when it comes to digital skilling in the country today in India. So what is working for our model is very simple. When we think about e-learning, the typical model is that internet, people can come and learn, is very scalable, everything is right in that construct of thing. Like Namita talked about an example of Coursera has put a video course on how to learn. But the reality is that there is only a top 5 to 10% of the talent pyramid who can learn on their own. Majority of the mid pyramid and bottom pyramid, they can't learn on their own. If that was the case, we invented books, right? There are always books. There was no need to invent university and schools, because majority of the learners, they need to be taught. They learn in a social setting. They learn by asking. They learn by seeing what is happening to their peers in the same setting as they are in. And that's exactly what we do on a Simplilearn platform. Learner come to us because they want to get taught by an instructor. Learner come to us because they want to help that, okay, I'm learning so and so topic, but I'm stuck. I need somebody who can really help me. And that makes us a very interesting proposition for India as a country. And we already see some that phenomena happening, right? There are a lot of kids all across the world who are learning coding because somehow coding caught the imagination of so many people across the world that your kids should learn coding. Where do you get so many instructors from? India. We don't have a lack of English speaking people who can teach this kind of skill. So I strongly believe that getting the entire world ready for digital skilling is a huge opportunity that we have as a country, and in the process, of course, our country will also get trained. So that's one part of what I wanted to talk about. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was that as digital economy becomes more mainstream, as more and more businesses go digital, and they will, it's a matter of time. I think just learning skills on their own. There are a lot of smart people who will figure it out, lot many things on their own. YouTube is such a great source to learn pretty much anything and everything, and some kind of platforms like GitHub and so many other community exist who can help people who are smart. So we also see an emergence of many new enterprises coming up in our country, wherein the founders will not necessarily have gone to a very popular university, or they might not have gone to maybe a university ever, but they'll end up building businesses which will be completely digital because they will acquire those kind of skills on their own. So I think with these two thoughts I wanted to end, and maybe more take up any questions that the audience might have.
Thank you so much. This was very useful, and it's basically from the field, right? I mean, you're working right at the bottom. There were a few questions. I think the first one is India ready for the transition towards a tech-driven learning model? Please elaborate. So I think you have already spoken from your side that you believe that we are ready in a way, and the gap would be that how close we are in terms of having that additional thing which you talked about, essentially that it's not just technology, but you also require some assistance in terms of how teaching would be conducted. Can you please elaborate on the second part of it, that how does one really do it in the field? How would you, after having put together a course online as a digital company, how do you manage to get that second part? How do you manage to crack that?
So if you look at Manish, I think that's where we as a country have an edge, right? As long as you are ready to pay, there are a lot of people who are ready to provide service around that, right? And that's what we do. We have thousands of instructors who come and teach on Simplilearn platform. Just to give you a sense of our number, at any point of time, on any day, we have 100,000 learners learning on Simplilearn platform live. It's not that they're going through a video. They are sitting in one or many classes being conducted on Simplilearn platform, and they are learning from an instructor. They are learning from each other. Now, as a country, we don't have lack of people, right? As long as they're ready to pay, there are people available to teach. So I think, and there are platforms doing it, right? Not only in our skilling space, even in the K-12 space, also now new models have come in wherein you not only learn from a video, there are instructor-led models that have evolved, and that's what technology has allowed. It was not possible maybe 5-6 years back when the internet connectivity and bandwidth was not that good, but now that's a solved problem. In India also, with the Geo coming, we have this high-speed internet even in every nook and corner of the across the world, who are all across the country, who are available to teach our students in any part of the country. I think the bigger challenge, if you look at the remote towns and villages of our country, is more like access to physical devices and internet, than having availability of instructors who can teach remotely in a live manner.
Great. Okay. Do you do any training of trainers? I mean, do you get into the training of trainer part, training your own trainers just to make sure that
Yes,
they're
Manish, we have a very extensive process on how to train on our platform. So some part of it is generic on how to train online, and some part is more specific to our platform and what is our pedagogy of teaching on our platform.
Okay, great. There is a question for Namita. Namita, the question is about potential funders who might be interested in these kind of changes that's occurring globally. And if we have partners who might be wanting to, let's say, grow in scale or change the way they are currently conducting skilling, then would there be potential funders, and what would be their incentives? Why would they be funding? That's the question someone has asked.
I mean, so just very off the top of my head, yes, of course, lots of funders. but particularly the part of IFC, which is a part of the World Bank that focuses on the private sector. There's a part of the IFC that that sort of does venture capital, sort of impact investing, and ed tech is a very, very important area for them. And the slide that I showed are all actually investees of the IFC, where IFC's put in money also. So IFC supports edtech players in different ways. It can either be equity, loan, but also technical advice. So yeah, the answer is yes, at least directly from us. But also otherwise, I mean, in our network, we have plenty of impact investors that are looking for interesting edtech models and would like to back them up.
Okay, thanks. Indrani, there's a question for you about some of the key quality control aspects that need to be considered while transitioning towards a tech-driven learning system. So do you have any advice on that?
No, I guess, when we are looking at going into the digital world, there are standards that are already existing, which are defined globally, as well as I think even when I look at the reports of the union budget, there are new standards that are getting defined both globally. When we look at if you've heard the recording of the Davos 2021, there are international standards that are being defined so that the taxonomy for learning is consistent between, let's say, Africa, India, US. So there is a way that if I'm saying that if a person after doing this course will get the level 100 kind of a skills, what does level 100 mean? We don't know exactly. So these quality controls in terms of standards are where they're getting redefined so that we are taking into consideration all the nuances that are popping up which we were not prepared for. So both globally as well as in the domestic area, we are releasing, government is mandating the education providers to make sure that when we are coming up with a training program, an online digital one, we take care of these, aligning to these standards.
So,
Okay,
Dr.
thank
Manish,
you
I
so
want to
much.
add something to this point. So, in today's world, where there is so much of demand-supply gap when it comes to digital skills, that as long as we have skills, nobody cares. So much of going on for people having this kind of skills that there's a literal war going for such kind of talent today. And this is a global war because now this whole remote working has proven that you can be anywhere and pretty much work for anyone, anywhere, right? So,
Yeah.
so like for example, there are a lot of standards. There's a qualification framework put in by NSDC, and we are a partner. We have implemented, but none of our learners really ask for that. The only thing they're interested is, okay, make me a data scientist, make me a cloud architect, because they know that the day they learn that skill, they have multiple job offers.
Yeah, so I think I'll add to that. One of the endorsement of the skills that, at least from Microsoft, we really encourage is the certification, the industry certification, because that at least is a proven one. And when, let's say, we have so many customers, global customers, how do they know that the skill imparted is correct, is actually meaningful or not? And therefore they're asking for a Bank of America or a Walmart in India. They want talent, but the only way to identify a person A versus person B is whether you are certified or not, and those are industry recognized certification.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. There is a last question, which is essentially to NSDC. Does NSDC have a return ROI of the program? So that's perhaps directed towards me. So I think because there is an ROI, that's why we have Mr. Krishna Kumar here. I'm quite sure there is for any program which is on skills. But so far as NSDC is concerned, we look at social rate of return, at the economic rate of return. We look at the externality that is created by digital system. And there I can add that now we have done some analytics, not for the digital part, and digital part will be multiplier or whatever we might have found. We have done such analytics for brick and mortar classroom training that we do. And we have found that for every 1 rupee that we invest in brick and mortar skill training, the return is 4 rupees for every 1 rupee, of which 2 rupee goes to the candidate and 2 rupee goes to as productivity to the industry. So that's is a multiple of 4. And I'm quite sure the return of investment would be slightly lower because you will not count the economic part of it, the externality part of it, but it'll be high enough that there are lots of people who are interested in it and are investing large amount in it. So I think we have exceeded our time because this was really interesting topic to be on, and I really thank everybody for staying back, despite the fact that we are a little late in terms of our closing. My friend Jobin, who has been in touch with you, is very keen to give the closing thank you address. So I'll request him to come over and take the things forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manish, and thank you so much to all our esteemed speakers. It was really amazing to listen to each of you. I'm sure all our participants enjoyed the session too. Before we close, I would like to thank all our participants, all our speakers, especially for all those who asked questions. A special thanks to all those behind the scenes who made this event possible. So hope to see you again for another amazing discussion, and thank you and hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a
Thank you.
good day.
Great
Thank you.
weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.